when we first started this, I guess that would have been spring of 19, right? That our goal was to raise $190,000, 1918, so the goal was the first year. We blew through that pretty handily, and so this actually is the third year in a row that our goal is in excess of $1 million. But also with One Ball State, what we really are tracking perhaps even more importantly than the dollars raised is the number of donors who participate, and particularly the number of new donors who participate, because this is actually a strategy. In addition to raising money towards the current capital campaign, it's engaging people who will be donors for many, many years to come. So the strategy is really about engagement in addition to the dollars. And that's why every gift of $5 or more counts, because it's a way of getting people engaged and in the habit of participating philanthropically in the university. So this is part of what has been an ongoing comprehensive fundraising campaign. You may have seen that in October, over homecoming weekend, we announced that during this campaign it was going to be the largest comprehensive philanthropic campaign in our history. So the overall goal of that campaign is to raise more than $350 million. The largest campaign in our history prior to that was about 210. So as of today, depending on how the outcome is today, we're somewhere between $275 and $280 million raised towards that comprehensive campaign and towards that goal of 350. There are really three pillars in the campaign, and the first one and the most ambitious one, the highest total we want to raise, is student financial support. And we're very intentional about using that phrase, student financial support, as opposed to scholarships, because oftentimes people connote the word scholarships with money that we'll use to encourage a prospective student to come to the university. But we use student financial support because we know that students quite often have financial needs during the time after they've already enrolled. So it would include scholarships to encourage students to enroll, but it also would be financial support to help students to retain, persist, and graduate. And so sometimes those are dollar needs that are larger. Sometimes they're relatively smaller dollar needs, like to help purchase books or supplies for a course and those kinds of things. So that's the first pillar and the largest pillar in the campaign. So we can talk about the campaign. We can talk about, I think last time we talked a little bit about college sports, both our Cardinals as well as what's happening on the national landscape. Or we can talk about anything else, any other topic that you want to talk about. Yeah.
Team Ball State Daily News. Just to one, can you go into the other two pillars of the Our Call to Beneficence campaign? And then also for our friends who may not be too familiar with it, can you kind of give the lowdown on what a capital campaign looks like from a university perspective?
Sure. So the second pillar in it relates to enriching the academic experience. So that may be things like that support faculty development and faculty enrichment, so that our outstanding faculty can continue to keep up with modern trends related to technology or modern learning trends. So that's the second pillar. And the third pillar is campus and community engagement and support. So the state provides substantial financial support for academic buildings, but the state does not fund anything other than an academic building. So athletic facilities, recreational facilities, residence halls and dining halls, and certainly the state doesn't support a project like the Village, the investment that we're making in the Village. So those are the second and third pillars in the campaign. Then every year the university is always engaged in fundraising. A comprehensive campaign is a much more intense effort over a period of years. And some people refer to it as a capital campaign, but sometimes, again, people think capital means money raised to invest in a building. So we tend to use the phrase that maybe more people can understand, which is comprehensive fundraising campaign. To understand, it's everything from scholarships to faculty and program support to facilities. So this campaign began shortly after I arrived. The first phase of it is what in the fundraising business they used to refer to as the silent phase, because you weren't public with your goal and what you were doing. That really doesn't apply to how we conducted it. We refer to it as the leadership phase, where we were focused primarily, not exclusively, on people who would give six-figure gifts in the hundreds of thousands or seven-figure gifts in the area of $1 million or more. And now we're in the public phase, where we're continuing to work on those really major gifts, but also where we're engaging and soliciting gifts all across the gift pipeline. So one of the things that's put us in this position is we already have more seven-figure gifts, that's $1 million or more, just in the leadership phase of this campaign than we had in the entire campaign previously. And so I think we have somewhere between 40 and 45 seven-figure gifts or more, including what you might have seen in December, the largest philanthropic gift in our history of $35 million from Lilly Endowment. Largest single gift before that was about $20 million. Was that responsive?
Yeah, perfect,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes.
Danny Huber, IPR News. You mentioned the Village. So, last semester we had that grand opening of the Brown Family Amphitheater, which is exciting. But then for the Village, the catalyst for that whole thing was the new Performing Arts Center. What has led Ball State to push for these arts and culture venues?
Okay. So I'll talk specifically, maybe you'll remind me if I forget, but I'll talk specifically why the Performing Arts Center for our theater and dance department. But there is a lot of emerging data in public policy research that what drives population growth, what drives economic development, that arts and culture, a vibrant arts and culture scene, is what creates quality of place where people want to move to. So we believe that that district, being grounded in arts and culture, will help us to attract students and retain students after they graduate. If Muncie and Delaware County is a more vibrant place to study, and students can also then see that after they graduate, it's a vibrant place to live, you create that virtuous cycle of young professionals, young people who are building the economy of the next generation or two. So that's, generally speaking, why that theme. The second reason is because, and I think this is true, we have on our campus and immediately adjacent to the Village, one of the largest collection of high quality, diverse and arts and culture venues already, right? So have you all been into Sursa Hall? If you haven't been into Sursa Hall, it's one of the finest concert halls on any college campus in the United States. Then you've got Emmons Auditorium, that hosts concerts, comedy shows, and the like. A little bit to the further north, you've got Pruis, where you can have smaller concerts, folk music concerts and the like. Now you've got the Brown Family Amphitheater, which is the largest and best outdoor amphitheater between Indianapolis and Fort Wayne. Okay? Then you move to the west, you've got the David Owsley Museum, which is consistently recognized as one of the 5 best art museums in the state of Indiana. Then you've got the Brown Planetarium, which is the largest planetarium dome in the state of Indiana, and the technology in the planetarium. Have all of you been to a planetarium show? If you haven't been to a planetarium show, you got to go into it to see it, because it's not just the size of the dome, it's also the dual technology that they have. I think, as I heard just recently, a couple days ago, it's the only planetarium in Indiana that has that dual technology, and it's one of only 10 or so in the country on a college campus that has that dual technology. Then you've got, moving further, you've got the Renard Greenhouse. Have all of you been in the greenhouse? We have the largest collection of orchids on any college campus in the United States. So the Renard Greenhouse is, and then to the further of that is the Glick Center for Glass. Right? So as I say, it is a concentration of extraordinary variety of arts and culture venues. So we already have that critical mass. So adding a performing arts center that is also, if I showed you a map with concentric circles, from the intersection of McKinley and Riverside, it's no more than 800 yards to any one of those venues. So then if you figure you build a hotel, a nice hotel, and a performing arts center in the Village, you're adding another venue, and that can also be a tourist destination. Obviously, when we build the hotel, people will come for orientation, or they'll come for homecoming, or they'll come from admitted student day or athletic events. But if we promote these assets and the venues appropriately, it will become a destination for people who just want to come to take advantage of these arts and culture venues. So then we also need a new performance venue for our musical theater program, our theater and dance department. Our musical theater program is consistently assessed as one of the top 10 quality programs at a college in the United States. So just to give you a couple statistics, we take about 40 to 50 incoming freshmen each year in the musical theater concentration in our BFA, Bachelor's of Fine Arts. How many high school seniors do you think we audition every year for one of those 40 to 50 slots? 200 is the first bid. Do we have? We actually audition more than 1,500 high school seniors every year for one of those 40 to 50 slots. That's how selective that program is. Yet so the program is extraordinarily competitive and produces very successful graduates. And I'll come back to just some of the graduates in just a second. But the venue that they're performing in, University Theater and Struthers, they were built in the 50s and they've been cosmetically enhanced, but they aren't modern technology. They're not fully ADA compliant yet. So we need a venue that is of the quality of our student performances. And I'll give you just two examples, two of our most recent graduates. Do everyone know who Kayla Davion is? Kayla Davion graduated in 2017. Even before she graduated from Ball State, she had already been cast in a Broadway show called Waitress. She recently finished, she's not even 7 years out of Ball State. She's actually appeared in 3 Broadway shows. The last Broadway show she appeared in was the Tina Turner, the musical. And in the last run of the Tina Turner musical, she played Tina Turner. She starred as Tina Turner on Broadway, right? So, and then Amani, and I'm going to can't remember Amani's last name, but Amani graduated last year. There's a national competition that the Kennedy Center in Washington sponsors every year for collegiate actors and performers. So like the NCAA basketball tournament, they compete in regions. So Amani won the outstanding best actor in the Midwest region and then was named the best collegiate actor in the country last May, right? So as I like to say, if Kayla Davion were a football player, she'd be a starting quarterback in the NFL right now. And if Amani was a football player, he would have won the Heisman Trophy, right? That's the quality of the students who participate in the program. That's the quality of the productions that those students put on when they're here. And so we need a venue that gives them an opportunity to even shine more brightly. And that venue will bring, they'll do about 160 to 180 shows a year in that new venue. And it will bring 35 to 40,000 people to the village to see our students perform just during the academic year once that theater is completed. Yes, please.
Sam Niger with Ball State Sports Link. I kind of want to switch it up a little bit. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you were one of the prosecuting attorneys for the Oklahoma City bombing case?
Correct.
If you could just describe what the atmosphere in the courtroom was like and what you kind of took from that case that you can apply to your life as president now.
Okay, sure. So do all of you know from history? I now know that none of you were probably born in 1995 when that occurred. So it's the worst act, still is the worst act of domestic terrorism in the history of the United States. Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols constructed a massive truck bomb, and Timothy McVeigh on April 19th, 1995, detonated that truck bomb in front of the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. It killed 168 people, 168 men, women, and children. Those of us who were around at that time recall that there were 19 babies who were killed in the bombing because there was a daycare center on the second floor of the front of the building. So they detonated a truck bomb essentially in front of a daycare center. So fast forward the trials of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, they both were arrested pretty promptly after that. The trial of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols was severed. And so I was actually appointed by the Attorney General during the McVeigh case, that's the one that went first, to be one of the principal trial lawyers in the case where Terry Nichols was the defendant. So this was a case in which the media attention was, around the world. It was covered on every major news organization. In fact, so in the courtroom where we were in Denver, it was in Denver, Colorado, courtroom would hold probably about 200 people. One side of the whole courtroom was reserved for media. And then every day walking in and out of the courthouse, there were those kind of rails that were set up. So we would walk a gauntlet of news reporters every day coming in and out. And so one of the things I remember was, when you're in a case of that magnitude and that pressure, you're also trying to find ways to decompress when you're not in the courtroom or preparing to be in the courtroom. But it was not possible, right? Because every newspaper was on the front page every day. Every news story, whether you're watching the Today Show in the morning or watching the 11 o'clock news, local or national, the first thing on the news program was what happened in the courtroom. So that was significant pressure. The next level of pressure was we understood that this case was not just about those individual defendants. They were attempting, they blew up the federal building in the hopes of instigating what they refer to as a second revolutionary war to overthrow the government. So we understood that this case was about not just trying to convict these two guys for a horrific crime, but also demonstrating the fundamental values of our democracy, our form of government, the criminal justice system, and how we treat people who were trying to overthrow the government. So what many people don't appreciate is that in addition, of course, with the United States paying for the agents and the prosecutors, both of these defendants were indigent, and so the taxpayers were also paying to represent the defendants who were trying to overthrow the government, right? And so they were given all of the due process rights that we promised to give to every criminal defendant in every case in the country, even though they were trying to attack that system fundamentally. So we understood our responsibility to conduct ourselves in a way that, notwithstanding what they were trying to do, what our country stood for on its best days. And then the third thing that was personally difficult for all of us was the emotional impact of a lot of the testimony. So in a case like this, particularly, this was a death penalty case. So one, in order to support the charges for the murder, we had to put on the testimony that demonstrated that 168 people were killed. So during the first phase of the trial, in different periods, we would call witnesses who would talk about what literally happened on that day and talk about the people in their office or their division who were killed. And so one of the women that I called to testify was the head of the Federal Credit Union that day. She had 19 of her 36 employees who were killed in that day. So I had to prepare her to testify and stand at a podium in a crowded courtroom and ask her questions. She described how in like 10 days after the bombing, she attended 20 funerals of either people who worked in her office or friends that worked in other offices. So the emotional impact of that testimony, I had to then, during the penalty phase or death penalty phase of the trial, had to ask questions of a woman who lost her in-laws and her 4-year-old daughter. So at that time, my wife and I had 3 kids. My wife was pregnant with twins. But for anybody who has a sense of humanity, to put on that testimony and maintain your professional composure was really, really hard. Because we would see these people, we would prepare them either the night before, the day before, or 2 days before, and have to walk through questions about the worst possible day that anyone could imagine. And those would be intensely emotional conversations, and then have to go into the courtroom and as I say, compose yourself. So as you could say, the pressure and emotional impact on that case was nothing like I'd ever experienced before. Yes, please.
Nick Parker, Ball State Sports Center. I mean, that career as an attorney, obviously, coming with a lot of stress, but it's something. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Why go from being an attorney to now being president at Ball State?
Yeah, right. So the first phase of my career as a prosecutor, I was in Brooklyn, New York, and I was doing organized crime cases. I assume all of you have seen The Godfather, right? Okay. Or Goodfellas, right? So if you've seen Goodfellas, that case was prosecuted by the office that I worked in after that case was. And those were exciting, interesting, challenging cases of notoriety. And then, as I said, the last case I was assigned to in the Justice Department was the Oklahoma City bombing case. And then I was at that point, my wife and I had, during that trial, moved to Cleveland, which is where my parents were living and a couple of my siblings were living. And I went into private practice, so I worked at a large international law firm, mostly doing internal investigations representing individuals or companies that might be under investigation and doing some commercial litigation. And then I was essentially recruited to become the dean of the law school at Cleveland State. And I decided to take on that opportunity because really just a couple reasons. One is, first of all, I think public education is public service, like being a prosecutor, a judge, or a public defender. Secondly, I believe education is the most significant driver continues to be the most significant driver of economic opportunity for people. And so I thought I would do that for about 5 or 6 years, and then I'd go back, maybe be a judge, maybe go back to the Justice Department. And then little after year 4, a new president came into the university and asked me to serve as the provost. Do you know what the provost is? I think some of you do. The provost is the chief academic officer. Every faculty member knows who the provost is. So you probably know that each of the colleges has a dean, and each of the deans then report to the provost. So it would be the chief academic officer, right, and all the dean. And I didn't want to do it. And the new president was kind of surprised because he was a traditional academic and I wasn't. And the reason I wasn't interested in it was because I really enjoyed being the dean of the law school because the college was small enough. I knew all of the faculty. I knew a lot of the students. I was still engaged with the legal community, both in Cleveland and nationally. And I knew that if I became a provost, I was making a career decision to continue down this path of staying in higher education. So I did it quite reluctantly, and each day thought I would prefer to be going back and being a dean and being closer to where education really happens. And then I had an opportunity to go be the president at Northern Kentucky University. And so that is what kept me on the path of higher education. And to me, that was not something that I did grudgingly. That was something that I did enthusiastically and why I feel so fortunate to be here. I loved being a prosecutor. I loved being a lawyer, a defense lawyer. I loved being in the courtroom. But in that situation, what you're doing is resolving a singular dispute between two parties. You're not making a difference more broadly in an institution or in a community or in the lives of lots of people. And so now the reason I'm so grateful for the opportunity of what I get to do is I get to participate in an enterprise, in a collective enterprise that I believe continues to change the lives of our students. And we have about 20,000 of them. Again, and I believe my father was the first in our family to go to college. Anybody in the room first in their family or first generation? Yeah. So the education that my father received changed the trajectory of not just his life, but changed the trajectory of our entire family. And so I didn't know this would happen. Didn't think anyone would be foolish enough to make me the president of a university, but I count myself lucky every day. Yes, please.
Danny Huber, IPR News. How has your law background helped you being president of Ball State?
Well, what you learn, like when you're in a case of whether it's a trial that's 5 weeks or 5 months, you understand that there are good days and bad days. And as one of my mentors, now a good friend, just constantly reminded me, which is a good reminder for all of us, is never let the highs get you too high or the lows get you too low. Before I went in professionally, I was a competitive athlete. I was a long distance runner. So if you've ever run a long distance race or played in a long athletic contest, you know it's up and down. And the ones who consistently perform well are the ones who figure out how to get from one high point to the other high point without losing too many points or too much ground in the low point. And so that part of being a competitive athlete, then coupled with being a trial lawyer, has enabled me to appreciate that, that there are some days where you have to deal with some of the challenges in order to celebrate those days when it's really gratifying. Also, I think, okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think is the most important skill of a trial lawyer? Am I allowed to do this in a press conference, Dr. Maria?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
I guess persuasion.
Persuasion is one of them. Yep.
Organization.
Organization is another one. Preparation.
Addiction.
Yep, being able to be articulate, right? But here actually is the most important skill, and people don't appreciate. It's listening, right? Because the foundation of persuasion is not saying what you think would persuade yourself, but it's understanding the perspective or thoughts of the people you're trying to persuade. And so sometimes you would see trial lawyers who are really well educated and who would be very persuasive in front of a group of appellate court judges, federal appellate court judges, who are also well educated. But your jury, by definition, and I was trying cases in Brooklyn, New York, we were bringing people of all backgrounds, all perspectives, sometimes jurors who hadn't even necessarily been born in the United States, and so the whole experience in a courtroom was foreign to them. And you had to learn how to engage them where they were, and not speak as if you were talking in a constitutional law course in a law school. You had to present that evidence and present your arguments. And I don't mean by dumbing it down. I'm just saying using words and speaking in a way and engaging them. And also people, you probably see all these courtroom shows where a witness is getting just pummeled by a lawyer on cross-examination. It never goes that way, right? Those are scripted. The best cross-examinations in real life are not a lawyer who's rapid-fire questioning, but is asking a question and listening carefully to what the person says. Doesn't have a script for their cross-examination, maybe has an outline of where they want to go, but has to go where the witness is taking them. And also, sometimes a witness called by the other side can actually help you. So you don't want to, attack their credibility. You want to bolster their credibility and then draw out those points that actually help your case, right? So listening, to me, listening is a critical skill of a trial lawyer. I think it's a critical skill in the job that I have, because I get to meet with a range of people, during the course of a day or during the course of a week. One point I might be meeting with the governor of the state, might be meeting with a prospective donor who's quite wealthy, successful in business. The next day I might be sitting down with a basketball coach who's asked me to visit with the parents of a potential recruit. So trying to find out ways how you can relate to such a wide variety of people. And you have to listen to what is important to them so that you can reach them and persuade them as to where they are. Yes, please. Yes, sir.
Nate Hucker, Ball State Sports Link. Not too long ago, we know you I believe, broke your foot.
Yeah.
And during that period, you were everywhere. Like everywhere across campus. Why was that important to you, that even through like an injury or like that going on, that you were just active and showed your face, and even at athletic events, just going around campus?
Limping in with my boot to the sideline seats in the back.
Like, why was that so important to you?
Well, because first of all, and I hope you could tell, I love this job. And the best part of the job is meeting so many different people, and in particular, meeting with students, so that when somebody like Dr. Maria gives me an opportunity to come visit with you, whether it's to engage in this kind of mock press conference or just hear what's going on in your class, it's the best part of the job. And so to me also, I love sports. I love the theater programs. That, again, what being a part of this job is, there's so many interesting things, irrespective of your interest. There's so many interesting things to do. I was confined to Brackenhouse for a little period of time. Did everyone know I got hurt? Yeah. So it was pretty, this is a true story. So I'm in the emergency room on Thanksgiving because my foot, which instead of going this way, my foot was going that way because I dislocated it and broke it in 3 places. And as I'm waiting there, as I'm lying there and they're figuring out what to do and calling orthopedists and all that, so I was in there for a while. And so people were coming, other healthcare professionals from all over the hospital were coming in to look at my foot. You never want to be the show and tell exhibit in the emergency room. That's just, and one guy literally came in and said, he looked at my foot, I'm lying down, of course, he looked at my foot and he said, "Oh, blank, that's gnarly." So fortunately, the good surgeons at Central Indiana Orthopedics put it back together. I now got a little titanium plate on the outside and a bunch of screws connecting my ankle back together. So for a while, but I did venture out of the house a few weeks later because I wanted to attend. We had a board meeting. I thought it was important to go to the board meeting. And then we had commencement. So if you were there, I wheeled onto the commencement stage in a wheelchair just because that's a special day for those graduating students and their family. And I wanted to be there for myself, but also to make sure that they knew that I would take reasonable efforts to get there. But that's why it's something I enjoy. I love being in the basketball games, football games. Jennifer and I went to theater events as well, figured out a way to get in and out of the.
No more ping pong though?
No more ping pong. Not yet anytime soon. I broke it playing ping pong with my son. He's going to pay for that. Yes, please.
I'm a dean in Ball State Media. So each president has a legacy or something that they want to leave. It's like as what they're remembered for. So as the 17th president, what is that you want?
So it's interesting. People ask that question from time to time, like, what is your legacy? Or what do you want your legacy to be? What was interesting is people were asking me that question like in year 2. And I was thinking, geez, maybe they're going to get rid of me quicker than I want. But now this is my 7th year. And I think there are a couple things that are important to me. One are things that are tangible, like continuing to support the ongoing physical transformation of our campus, whether it's the new North Residential Village and the new residence halls and dining halls, the new Brown Family Amphitheater. Over the next year or so, we're going to spend more than $80 million renovating the CAP building and several other academic facilities on campus. Less, shiny, but probably even more important than an outdoor amphitheater in terms of having an impact on the day-to-day educational experience of our students in modern facilities. So that's something that's important to me. Second, and people, it's not my responsibility, but that will be meaningful to me. Another thing is our university has had a long history of financial stability. You probably read in the paper from time to time, whether it's West Virginia or Penn State or Rutgers, even these national flagship institutions that are having a significant budget deficit and are eliminating programs. I mean, I think West Virginia is not going to have any, West Virginia flagship university is not going to have any foreign language majors when these budget reductions are done. So my responsibility is to ensure that we have people who are, as I say, preserving the long-term financial stability. So it's not just what happens with academic programs while I'm here, but it's what happens over the next 20 years. Three other things. The other thing that I care about is the Village Project. I believe that project will be transformational in terms of helping us to attract students, encouraging our students to stay, and being a resource, a place of vitality for the entire community. None of you remember it. I never experienced it, but 40, 50, 60 years ago, that was a vibrant commercial district for people all across the community. There were clothing shops, men's and women clothing shops. There were restaurants. There was a sweet shop. There were all kinds of things. So people came from all over the community. If you talk to anybody Kids who grew up in Muncie rode their bicycles to the village. People shopped there. So our phrase is we want it to be a multi-generational district. We want it to be attractive to our students, of course, but we also want it to be attractive to people who work at the hospital, people who work at the university, and just people all across the region. The next thing I would say is our partnership with the Muncie Community Schools. And maybe I can expand on that in a bit if you'd like, but that partnership, I think, is another long-term transformational project, something that will be transformational, not so much for our campus, but for the community that we serve. And then the last thing is, one of the things that attracted me to Ball State were the values that are represented by beneficence. Those resonated with me personally. I think it's those values that create the culture on our campus and the character of our people. And so I hope that people will remember that I've really tried to elevate and speak intentionally about those values. And I refer to them as enduring values. I didn't create them. They existed before I got here. They're going to exist after I leave. But I hope what I have done is raise people's awareness of the importance of those values. Yes, please.
Do you see yourself finishing your career here?
Yes. Yep, I'm old enough. This is it. Yes.
Callie, too, on Ball State Sports. Like you kind of talked about the beneficence kind of being one of the things that led you to Ball State. Kind of walk us through, how that was and what got you here.
So a couple things. One is I mentioned the transformative impact. We still have 30%, approximately 30, sometimes as many as 35% of our incoming students every year are in the first generation in their families to go to college. There are a lot of institutions that have that, not a ton, but a lot. But what we couple it with, which many other institutions don't, is also very strong retention and graduation and placement rates. So that's really important. Obviously, it's important to make an institution accessible to a wide group of people, but you're really not doing them a great service if you enroll but they don't get to commencement. So we really focus on those success metrics. The campus, the beauty of the campus, the long-term financial position, the commitment to community engagement, Muncie Community Schools and others, or just serving the community. But it really was beneficence. I'm one of 9 kids. Jennifer and I have 5 kids. And Jennifer, my wife, is one of 8 kids. So the values of beneficence also were the kinds of values that our parents sought to instill in us and our siblings. Those are the values that we hope to instill in our children. And so Jennifer and I thought that if there was an institution where we could work that also resonated with us, with who we are as people, that was a perfect fit. Yes, please.
How did you and Jennifer meet?
I was teaching at a prep school in Morristown, New Jersey, which is a city about an hour west of New York City. And Jennifer at the time had just graduated from college. We were both competitive distance runners. And so a guy that I was training with, his girlfriend was training with Jennifer, and they were trying to fix us up. And so,
Good job.
What's that?
Damn good job.
Well, so this is a true story. How much time do I have, Dr. Maria? Do I still? Okay. So there's a punchline to this story. So this is pre-cell phone. So they had arranged for us to meet them at a bar in New York City late on a Saturday night. And this goes back to sports. Happened to have been on the same day of the Army-Navy football game. It's always the Saturday after Thanksgiving. One of my college roommates was from Philly. He and a bunch of my college roommates were getting together for the Army-Navy game. So I drove from New Jersey down to the Army-Navy game, and halfway through the game, they're like, they're going to go out after the game. And they say, well, you coming with us? I said, no, I've got a friend set me up. And they're like, you don't even know her. Why are you going to drive? I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. So I go out to the payphone on the concourse, because again, this is no cell phone, and I call my friend Richard to say, I'm not coming back. And he doesn't have an answering machine, and he's not picking up the phone. And so and again, this is no cell phone, no text message, none of that stuff. So every 15, 20 minutes, I'm going out. You guys know what payphones are, right? Probably haven't used one recently, but right. So I'm going out to this payphone, calling long distance from Philadelphia to New Jersey, saying not coming back, and he doesn't pick up. I'm leaving no answer, and so my friends are saying, well, just blow it off. It doesn't really matter, you know. I'm like, I can't do that. So after the game is over, I drove 2.5 hours from Philly back to Jersey, changed my clothes, drive into New York City at 10:30, met Jennifer and Richard and Richard's girlfriend in New York City, and we've been together ever since that first meeting. That was a long time ago. What's that? Yeah, it was a good thing I didn't blow it off. Even better thing for my 5 kids.
Maria Williams, Hawkins Media 110. A couple of questions, President Mearns. After hearing your pre-Ball State experiences, what's been the toughest part of your 7 years here?
It has to be the pandemic, right? The pandemic was probably the toughest and in some ways the most gratifying. So it was toughest for all the reasons that you know, but that perhaps you probably can't understand the intensity of what we were doing, right? So I was in New York City for spring break. We were for theater, dance events. That's when in New York it was really starting to take off. We're thinking it's not going to hit Indiana, right? It's New York, it's Boston. We're back here for about a week, maybe 10 days. Then the governor, issues that order, and we had to essentially send students and everyone home and figure out how to run classes. Well, we had about 72 hours to get students out of the residence halls, close up the campus, and then we took a week off and allowed faculty to figure out how to complete the semester fully remote, right? I mean, it's not like they had a summer or even a winter break to prepare, right? You remember that, right? And figure out how to support our students so that they could complete the semester successfully. All the time figuring out all the different protocols. So the intensity of that was, and there's no playbook for a pandemic like this, right? All of us, every institution, every organization, every family was figuring it out. So within a matter of a week or so, we're having a leadership team meeting every morning at 8 o'clock, making decisions. Can't even some of these decisions I can't even fully consult with the board because we have to move so quickly. So that was clearly the most difficult challenge. The reason I say it was the most gratifying is because we, and by that I mean all of my colleagues, faculty, staff, students, are our friends and supporters. We, by working together and staying focused on our mission, we continued to provide educational experiences for our students. And our students continued to adapt to the changing nature of those challenges. So I don't know what the statistics are, but from March of 2020 through last July, essentially those 3 years of the pandemic, right, from March of 20 to about July of 23, I think we conferred somewhere between 20 and 25,000 degrees, right? So that means, almost 20 to 25,000 students, because of their persistence and determination and the commitment of our faculty and staff, they were able to complete their education. I mean, so when I look back on the pandemic, I really don't remember all the difficult times and difficult decisions. What I take away from that is the resilience and commitment of the people at this institution is just extraordinary, and why I'm fortunate to be a part of it.
All right, and my second question is, in light of what's happened to DEI in Florida, how do you see changes or taking place or not taking place here in Indiana and in Ball State in particular?
Yeah. So the Senate Bill 202, which is now the law in Indiana, at its core it actually requires institutions to do things that we've already been doing, which is the statute, the phrase they use is cultural diversity, which we would know as diversity, equity, and inclusion work, inclusive excellence. And then it added to that a commitment to support intellectual diversity, which we already have been doing in what we refer to as freedom of expression. Right? So at its core, the bill, the elements or the aspiration of the bill is the pathway that we've already been on. So I don't see a change in our commitment to creating an inclusive and welcoming community for people of all backgrounds, perspectives, ideas, and opinions, right? That's what freedom of expression is about, is creating an environment where people, irrespective of their background, they can express their diverse views on controversial issues in a civil and constructive way. There will be some policy changes we need to make. There will be, one of the things that I know cause perhaps some concern among faculty is a requirement for post-tenure review. We'll create a process. I think the criticism was this post-tenure review will be a vehicle for people on our board of trustees or other people to inject politics into an academic environment. Not going to happen. I know our board. We're going to create a post-tenure review policy that is comparable to the policy we already have for conferring tenure, which relies heavily on the academic, both scholarship and performance in the classroom of faculty, as evaluated by that faculty member's peers in the discipline and in the department. The department chairs, college and department committees, deans, and provosts. Our board of trustees is not going to get into that core academic business. Now, what you can debate philosophically, should there be post-tenure review? That's a different debate. We continue to evaluate tenured faculty on a regular basis anyway. This is a more comprehensive process, but in principle, it's not different than the evaluation we already have. Now, having all said that, given what has happened in Florida and some other states, I can understand why there is some, and I said in my statement that I sent out to faculty and staff a couple weeks ago, I can understand why there's some anxiety or apprehension. But my view is, let's focus on what's actually in the bill and how we are going to implement the expectations and requirements in the new law. Yes, please. Yes, sir.
Alexander Woods,
Yes.
Newsom, Indiana. And so as you transition further into your tenure at Ball State, what do you see as the greatest opportunities and challenges facing this institution for the future, and how do you plan to navigate through them?
So the greatest opportunity, and I think one of the most important responsibilities I have, is continuing to help us recruit outstanding people. One of the ways in which my influence might endure after I'm gone is if the quality of the people that we hire in all kinds of positions all across the institution. And so I think that's an opportunity. I'm very proud of the folks that are on our leadership team, our deans, and the work that they do to recruit outstanding colleagues. So to me, that's one of the, both, I think it's actually a responsibility I have and an opportunity that I have to have an enduring impact on the institution. The biggest challenge, I think, is the increasing skepticism about the value of getting a college degree. That has not existed. I mean, you know, when my father, you know, both of my parents were born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. My father's father, my grandfather, was a nightclub singer. His mother was a secretary. But when he got a chance to go to college, they saw that as an extraordinary opportunity, an opportunity that they didn't have. And now you have people sometimes in positions of responsibility who are vocally questioning the value of a college degree. One of the things I sometimes wonder is when you hear somebody say that, what you'll often hear is, college degree isn't needed, college isn't for everyone. I wonder whether they're saying that about their own children. Or when they're saying college isn't for everyone, they're talking about somebody else's kids. And so I always want to ask them, did your son and daughter, did you go to college? Did your son and daughter go to college? Did you save money to make sure that your kid could get a quality college education? because, as I say, I'm concerned when some people say that they're making a judgment about who should go to college and who shouldn't. Now, having said that, college isn't necessarily the appropriate path for every high school graduate, right? I'm not questioning that, but that proposition shouldn't be made, I mean, that decision shouldn't be made by somebody else. We collectively should be providing strong opportunities for that person and perhaps that person's family. But I still believe for the vast majority of people, getting a college education, getting some post-secondary education, getting an additional credential will prepare you for more opportunities, will open more doors than not. And so that, as you can tell, I get myself a little worked up on that issue about when people are making judgments about what's good for others.
I'll give Brian the last question, that's all I can.
Yeah.
Brian Short, Ball State Sports Link. You had touched on it a little bit earlier, but can you go into a little bit more depth of your partnership with the Muncie Community Schools and how that has strengthened the university's relationship with the local community?
I was selected by the Board of Trustees in January of 2017 and started in May of 17. In that intervening period, the state, the General Assembly, initiated an administrative takeover of the Muncie Community Schools because of the finances and supervision of the schools was so poor. It's only the second school district in the history of the state that had been in that condition that required that kind of intervention. And so I'm going to speak pretty clearly. We're one of the most outstanding teachers' colleges in the country. And yet the public school district in our hometown is in dire straits. To me, to put a pretty blunt word on it, that was an embarrassment for us, I think. So I think we had a responsibility to provide whatever support we could, because we have such expertise on our campus and because we can mobilize expertise and student participation across every discipline, not just teachers college, right? People, students and faculty in this college can expose junior high school and high school kids to what it's like to be a journalist or to get into media or into video production, right? So every discipline on our campus can participate in this partnership. But then I want to take it to one more level. So all of you know Emmons Auditorium, right? But you probably don't know the history of Emmons Auditorium. One of the things I said earlier is the state provides funding for academic buildings, but not for performance venues like Emmons Auditorium. So President Emmons, who was the president here for 46 years, something like that, he wanted to build this beautiful venue. So unbeknownst to the members of the General Assembly, he created a long-term plan to get them to fund 3 academic buildings. That's why there are those 3 academic buildings on the perimeter of Emmons Auditorium. The state paid for 3 of the 4 walls of Emmons Auditorium without knowing it, right? But so then he had to go out and raise money for the actual auditorium itself, which at the time I think he had to raise $3 or $3.5 million. Just a few years ago, we expanded the entrance. You know, we did that new entrance. It cost us just as much in 2018 to build the new entrance as it cost to build the entire Emmons Auditorium back in the early to mid 1960s. But what was interesting is, if you've read the history, President Emmons went to, of course, the Ball brothers were still here, the Ball Corp, the Ball Foundation. So the wealthy, successful people and institutions in the city participated in the fundraising campaign. But what I read and understood was President Emmons went to the factories on the south side of Muncie. That's when there were a lot of very robust factories with a lot of people working in them. And he went into the break room to meet with the frontline factory workers. And he asked them to do payroll deduction, to give nickels and dimes and quarters from their paychecks to support the capital campaign to build Emmons Auditorium. And I was reading that in the fall of 2017 when we were deciding whether to get involved with the Muncie Community Schools, how big of a commitment to make. And it occurred to me when I read that story that the children now in the Muncie Community Schools, many of those children are the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of those frontline factory workers, those women and men who gave nickels and dimes out of their paycheck. And so for me, it was not just a professional responsibility that we had as a university. I think it was a moral obligation to repay a debt that we have. And so if you go into Emmons Auditorium, notice it's not just called Emmons Auditorium. It's the John R. Emmons Campus and Community Auditorium, because it was built and funded from our friends and neighbors. So we are now a university that's thriving in a community that needs our support. And as I said, I think it's our responsibility to pay it back. I'll tell you two things real quickly before we wrap up. So I told that story at a small fundraiser in Houston, Texas, about a year ago. And when I was done, one of the guys who was there, an elderly gentleman, stood up and said, "What he just said is the truth." And he said, "I was a boy at that time." And he said, he remembers the dinner conversation when his father came home from one of those factories and told his mother and the other kids that they as a family were going to make a sacrifice to contribute to Emmons Auditorium. Right? So there are still people living who remember that. And then Ron Farquhar, who's a very successful businessman here in Muncie. Ron is also, I think, got to be about 80 years old.
He would never say that.
Yeah, right. So Ron said he can do one better. He was a paper boy in Muncie back in the early 1960s. And President Emmons one morning got up at 5 a.m. and met at the newspaper distribution location where all the paper boys would come to pick up their newspapers before they'd get on their bikes and ride around. And he asked the paper boys to give a quarter. He said, if you give a quarter towards this campaign, you'll essentially buy a brick to go in the campaign. And Ron said he gave 75 cents to the Capitol campaign. And he says, to this day, every time he drives by Emmons Auditorium, he says, I bought 3 bricks for Emmons Auditorium, right? So that's the legacy of this community that we've inherited. But now the shoe is on the other foot, and so to me, the Muncie Community Schools is about fulfilling a professional responsibility and a moral obligation to these children. Thank you. Appreciate it.